All right. So the Holocaust, or we left off, it is was the systematic campaign to racially purify uh Europe of the 11 million people, more than half of whom were Jewish people. And why did they target the Jews? Well, the primary reason was that Germany blamed the Jews for their defeat during World War One. And Jews lose their rights with the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which stripped Jews of their citizenship, jobs, and property, forced them to wear big, bright yellow stars. The Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, on November 9th and 10th of 1938, Nazi stormtroopers attacked Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues across Germany. Afterwards, the Nazis blamed the Jews for the destruction. So, if I could just kind of pinpoint how that directly correlates to what has happened in some extreme conservative regions in the United States today, like uh, think about what happened with Trayvon Martin. Think about what happened with George Floyd. Think about what happened with Mike Brown. And in those instances, what you see is that many of those African American communities, the local governments hired some people called agent provocateurs. The purpose of those agents were to go in and find out why there was such a coercion, as like what were they doing, who were the leaders, and if they could not find out any of that information, or even if they could find out any of that information, it was to destroy the movement from within. And that's what you see here that has happened with the Night of Broken Glass in Germany. You also saw that with the modern day movements that were protesting the police brutality in the United States, and it has its origins in the French Revolution. So anyway, moving on. So hundreds of Jewish homes and businesses were torched during that time period. Some Jews fled to the United States. As a result of the increasing violence, many Jews tried to come to the United States. However, quite a few countries were not willing to take Jewish refugees. Of the 100,000 refugees that came to the United States was Albert Einstein, author Thomas Mann, and architect Walter Gropey, and theologian Paul Tillich. The plight of the St. Louis passenger ship was an example of how the indifferences of how Americans felt about, the Jews, is this, passenger ship. And so what's happening here? This was a German ocean liner holding almost 1,000 Jews that passed by Miami, Florida in 1939, but was rejected by the United States government. Yep, the United States had an opportunity to save almost 1,000 Jews, and they did not. The United States Coast Guard followed the ship to prevent anyone from disembarking into the United States. The ship was returned to Europe. More than half of the 943 passengers on the ship was later killed during the Holocaust. So Hitler's final solution. By 1939, there had only been about 250,000 Jews that remained in Germany, but other nations that Hitler occupied at the time had millions more. Obsessed with his desire to rid Europe of Jews, Hitler imposed what he called the final solution. And it's just the numbering map of the Jewish population in Europe in 1939, and then what it looked like in 1937, which was a lot more Jews in Europe at that time period. So the final solution is a policy of genocide that involved the deliberate and systematic killing of the Jewish population in Europe. So you're probably wondering, how is this connected, or doesn't this sound like the same definition of the Holocaust? Well, the Holocaust include the extermination of anybody who was not Nazi across Nazi-controlled regions of Europe. And it just so happened that the largest group that was persecuted just so happened to be the Jewish people. However, the final solution was strictly and directly pointed at eliminating Jewish people. And this rested on the belief that Aryans, or the so-called Aryans, were superior people, and that the purity of the master race, the Aryans, must be preserved. And so here's another interesting thing. The pink triangle is second only to the rainbow as a symbol of support for sexual diversity. It got its start in Nazi Germany. The Nazis categorized people in concentration camps with colored triangles. And for gay men, those triangles were pink and also larger than the triangles marking other groups. So this was so that the gays could be spotted at a distance and singled out for abuse. Minecraft creator is anti-Semitic as well. Marcus Pearson, the creator of the popular video game Minecraft, is a sexist and a racist. The villager in Minecraft is based on stereotypes of hedonistic Jews. The hedonistic Jews seem like the character here that I have. They usually have like the big nose, or they walk around with their arms crossed like the hedonistic Jews does. And so it's stereotypical. And whenever you base a character on the stereotypes and not actually use your creativity, or in this case, he might have the lack thereof, to try to show it's just a different character, as all of us are different, then that creates problems. And usually stereotypes create prejudices create racism. So Hitler's stand Hitler's hatred went beyond Jews. Hitler condemned the death and slavery not only to Jews but other groups that he viewed as inferior or unworthy or as enemies of the state, such as the Gypsies. These were the traveling non-Christian people in Eastern Europe, particularly in Eastern and Southern Europe. You had the Slavs, which has this root word in slaves, or the Slavic people, which is just between like the nations of Eastern Europe and like as far as Asia Minor anyway, which is an old term. And so between those two regions, you have places like Turkey. You have like I guess Greece even can be considered a part of these Slavic nations. Anyway, the Jehovah's Witnesses, Black people, Chinese people, homosexuals, even the handicapped, mentally ill, and mentally deficient, or even physically deficient, they were all targets of Hitler's hatred, and he had them mass murdered. And here it goes, some numbers. You can look at that, pause that when you get a chance. But Jewish ghettos in Poland. So Jews were also ordered into dismal, overcrowded communities called ghettos in various Polish cities. And so in African American community in roughly the 1950s and 60s or so, the term began to be used for poor Black communities. And even so much so in the 1990s, it became a term of endearment for a hood or for a neighborhood that was predominantly Black. However, the term does have its origins in Jewish history, and it even goes back before World War II. Alfred, report to the front office. Alfred, report to the front office. Sorry about that. But then you also have like the word goes back as far back as Spain and the medieval periods of Spain, where they were trying to do the Reconquista, and they forced a lot of Jews out of Spain and the Iberian Peninsula. And so they forced them into ghettos. That was the term that was used. But factories were built alongside the ghettos where people were forced to work for German industry. Many of these Jews were then transferred to the infamous concentration camps or labor camps deep within Poland. The final stage, Hitler's program of genocide against Jews, took place primarily in 6 Nazi death camps located in Poland. The final stage began in early 1942. The Germans used a poison gas to more quickly exterminate the Jewish population. Each camp had huge gas chambers that could kill as many as 12,000 people per day. That's a lot of people. And so the images that I'm about to show you could be very disturbing. So you see the Auschwitz extermination camp with its infamous motto, work makes ones free. And so the interesting thing about this, if you're into Marvel movies, as far as like, Captain America, or even if you go far back into Marvel, at the height of their popularity after Blade, that is, and you go to like what is it? X-Men, and one of the first X-Men films that show the origins of Magneto directly talks about not just like the first time you're introduced to Magneto as a child, you see his parents being separated in 1944 at Auschwitz, and they do a replica of this gate to which he first showed signs that he was magnetic, and when he was separated from his parents and grandparents at a concentration camp. And so yeah, like just something to make it more relevant. Anyway, this is Buchenwald prisoners in nearby woods just before their execution in 1933. They were even executing, women, Jewish women, with their babies in their hand. Roughly 17,000 Jewish women in the Ukraine region were killed by Nazi German soldiers. 2 million children were killed during the Holocaust overall. The German police shoots individual women, Jewish women, who remain alive in a ravine after the mass execution in 1942. Children subject to medical experiments at Auschwitz. These children were had their skin burned. They were trying to test a fire repellent, and they tested it on Jewish children. A truckload of bodies at Buchenwald, the concentration camp. Notice this they don't get a proper burial. They didn't think these people deserved it, which is sad. At Dachau concentration camp, 2 United States soldiers gaze at Jews who died on board a death train. A Nazi about to shoot the last Jew left in Vinica, Ukraine. Um, Soviet soldiers stand dumbfounded at a large pile of human ashes found at the Majdanek concentration camp in 1944. I mean, I'm not even sure if I would even want to stand next to that. Dachau survivors on the day of liberation. Look how malnourished they were. And so this is one of my favorite poems from this time period in American history. They came for the communists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Catholic. But then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. That's by Pastor Martin Niemöller. And I think the sentiments of this poem is that, be sure to be able to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, or at least try to. Make it known where you stand on certain things in society, regardless if you're Democrat, Republic, regardless if you're conservative or radical or liberal or even moderate, whatever it is, stand up for the people that's being downtrodden, because there could be a time where you will be the downtrodden and be abused in one way or another by the masses of society. And so never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to dust. Never. That's by Eli Wiesel, a camp survivor. And, the Jewish Holocaust remembrance phrase, or at least slogan, is never again. So just some more disturbing images of how they were, not trying to, give these people proper burials. I always found this photograph interesting. I'm not gonna lie to you, I found it online, not in any books or anything like that. And you have everybody, doing the Hail Hitler sign, except for this guy. He is not trying to do it. And so I guess what I'm saying is there was even some people in the face of all the atrocities still willing to stand their position, even if it sadly meant their death, like this young gentleman. Um, and so Walter Roth, he was the SS colonel who invented the mobile gas chambers, and was responsible for murdering almost 250,000 people, managed to escape justice. After World War II, he was arrested by Allied forces in Milan. He escaped from prison a year later and took refuge in Chile, South America. In 1961, a warrant for his arrest was issued, but Chilean Supreme Court refused to extradite him because the statute of limitations had expired. Roth lived as a free man until his passing at the age of 77. And so this is going to be much more when we get to the Nuremberg trials after World War II. However, at this point in our lesson, it's just like showing you that even some of these jokers got away, and it could really piss you off. But there were some people who like they did not just take it. Like you had the Inglorious Bastards, which is a like a film, but it is based on a group of people. And so meet the Nakam, a partisan group made up of former Holocaust victims. They found out that most German soldiers were about to walk free from their crime and went undercover to assassinate them. Among the things they did was sabotaging their enemies' vehicles to cause fatal accidents. At one point, some even took jobs at bakeries to poison 3,000 loaves of bread, which poisoned at least 1,900 German POWs. The exact number of deaths is unknown, but the original goal was to kill over 6 million German soldiers who were about to walk scot-free for all the stuff that they did to Jews and other people, which can't you blame them for their actions? I encourage you to go and look at the video link that I posted there. Anyway, Leon Bass, he was a Black World War II hero that liberated the first set of Jews from the Buchenwald concentration camp. So some background information on Leon Bass. He was born in Philadelphia. He served as a volunteer in a unit in Alabama and here in Florida, and was involved in the Battle of the Bulge. Milton S.J. Wright was an African-American academic born in Georgia that earned his PhD in Germany in 1932. And he wrote his dissertation on economics of Africans in Europe. And during that time period, he had to do he wanted to do an interview with the chancellor turned dictator of Germany, which was Adolf Hitler. And Hitler allowed him to have an audience while he was interviewing him. One thing that narcissists love is an audience. And so Hitler made a point that you may or may not like, but he very much might have been right within what he said. Hitler pointed out that American blacks have no rights, and criticized them for being docile about their oppression, saying, quote, Negroes must be definitely third-class people to allow whites to lynch them, beat them, segregate them without rising up against them, close quote. Now, of course, the civil rights movement will happen after World War II, but he was right about many of the African Americans at that time. So he's said to be this Milton S.J. Wright gentleman is said to be the only black man to have ever had a conversation in person with Adolf Hitler. Hitler's views on black Americans. And he also said, don't you think that your people are destined perpetually to be slaves of one kind or another? Yes, your people are a hopeless lot. I don't hate them. I pity the poor devils. So yeah, screw you, Hitler. Anyway, so starting another section, section 4, America moves towards war. Congress passed the cash carry provision, which basically moves the United States to be able to sell guns to countries at war. But more formally, it goes by another name. We'll talk about that in a moment. The Axis threats rises. Britain gets United States support. The Axis power were making great progress across Europe. France fell to Germany in 1940. We know that. And the Axis powers were formidable. You had Germany, Italy, Japan. So now we know that it's Axis versus the Allied. Hoping to avoid two ocean war, FDR scrambled to support Britain. He provided 500,000 rifles, 80,000 machine guns, and numerous ships. Now, this all goes against the Neutrality Act, but he got away with helping China defend themselves against Japan earlier on in the late 30s. But now he's going to have to do this for Britain because he don't want to have a war coming over to the physical land of America. So FDR ends up wins a third term, which was unprecedented at the time. No president in the United States had ever ran for 3 terms. And even if they did, they possibly wouldn't have won. But many Americans didn't want to switch ships because, as you know, we were at war. We didn't need to change leaders or about to be at war. Mind you, all of this has happened before Pearl Harbor, by the way. So they do give the Lend-Lease Act. Congress agrees that they can allow to lend or lease arms and money to nations whose defense was vital to America. And America became the great arsenal of democracy, which is no different from what Woodrow Wilson said during World War I in a part of the 14 points. I need you to understand that rhetoric has always been spewed in times of America getting involved in foreign affairs. We must make the world safe for democracy. So the United States supports Stalin of all people because Hitler turned around and broke that non-aggression pact in 1941. It didn't take Hitler long to be made out a liar, but that's what narcissists do. And so German U-boats traveled in wolf packs at night, torpedoing weapons shipments headed to Britain and the USSR. So these ships were sinking American ships that was selling and lending guns and ammunition to the USSR and Great Britain. So FDR okayed the United States warships to attack German U-boats in self-defense. So we're inching closer and closer and closer towards going to war. The Atlantic Charter, late in 1941, FDR and Great Britain Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the first guy to use the phrase OMG, met secretly and agreed on a series of goals for the charter, or for, at least for the war. And along with their goals were collective security, disarmament, self-determination, economic cooperation, and freedom of the seas. This declaration of the United Nations, which obviously you can see where we're going here, also known as the Declaration of Human Rights, was signed by only 26 nations, but it would catch on. And that is pretty much where we're going to end our lecture for today. We'll pick up from there on tomorrow. Have a good day. Learn something.